The story of the Arab Spring begins with a simple act of defiance. It was a moment that would spark a wave of change across an entire region, altering the course of history. In December 2010, Mohamed Bouazizi, a young Tunisian fruit vendor, set himself ablaze. His act was not just a cry of personal anguish but a desperate plea for dignity and justice. His desperate act, a protest against police harassment and economic despair, ignited a revolution. Bouazizi's self-immolation was a powerful statement against the systemic corruption and lack of opportunities that plagued many Tunisians. Bouazizi's story resonated with millions across the Arab world who faced similar struggles. His sacrifice became a rallying cry for those who had long felt voiceless and oppressed. His self-immolation became a symbol of resistance, a catalyst for change. It was a stark reminder of the lengths to which people would go to demand their rights and freedoms. Tunisians took to the streets demanding an end to corruption and oppression. The protests were marked by a sense of unity and determination, as people from all walks of life came together to demand change. Protests spread rapidly, fueled by social media and a shared yearning for freedom. Platforms like Facebook and Twitter became crucial tools for organizing and spreading the message of the revolution. The regime of Zine El Abidine Ben Ali, in power for over 2 decades, crumbled under the pressure. The government's attempts to suppress the protests only fueled the people's resolve. On January 14, 2011, Ben Ali fled the country, marking a historic victory for the Tunisian people. It was a moment of triumph and a testament to the power of collective action. The Tunisian revolution sent shockwaves across the region. It inspired similar movements in countries like Egypt, Libya, and Syria, where people also sought to overthrow oppressive regimes. It demonstrated the power of peaceful protest and the fragility of authoritarian regimes. The world watched as ordinary citizens stood up against tyranny, showing that change was possible. Most importantly, it inspired hope. The Tunisian revolution showed that even in the face of great adversity, the human spirit could prevail. The Arab Spring had begun. It was a time of great uncertainty but also immense possibility, as people across the Arab world dared to dream of a better future. Inspired by Tunisia's success, Egyptians took to the streets on January 25, 2011. Protests erupted in Cairo's Tahrir Square, demanding the ouster of President Hosni Mubarak. The demonstrations were met with brutal force from security services. Despite the violence, the protesters persisted, their numbers swelling by the day. Tahrir Square became a symbol of defiance and national unity. Egyptians from all walks of life joined the protests, united by their desire for freedom and dignity. After 18 days of relentless demonstrations, Mubarak resigned on February 11, 2011. The fall of Mubarak, a seemingly invincible ruler, sent a powerful message: even the most entrenched dictatorships could be overthrown. The Egyptian revolution, like its Tunisian counterpart, was a testament to the power of people power. It showed that ordinary citizens armed with courage and determination could bring down dictators. The Arab Spring was in full swing. In Libya, the Arab Spring took a darker turn. Inspired by events in Tunisia and Egypt, Libyans rose up against the brutal regime of Muammar Gaddafi in February 2011. However, the protests quickly escalated into a full-blown civil war. Gaddafi, determined to cling to power, unleashed his forces on the Libyan people. The international community, led by NATO, intervened in March 2011, launching airstrikes against Gaddafi's forces. The intervention helped to tip the balance in favor of the rebels. However, it also contributed to the fragmentation of the country. Libya descended into chaos, with rival militias vying for control. The Libyan revolution, unlike those in Tunisia and Egypt, failed to usher in a new era of democracy. Instead, it plunged the country into years of instability and violence. The Libyan example highlighted the complexities of intervening in civil conflicts and the challenges of rebuilding shattered states. Section 4. Syria. From peaceful protests to brutal civil war. In Syria, the Arab Spring ignited a brutal and protracted civil war. Protests against the regime of Bashar al-Assad erupted in March 2011, inspired by the uprisings in Tunisia and Egypt. However, Assad responded with overwhelming force, determined to crush the dissent. The Syrian conflict quickly escalated into a complex and multifaceted war, with regional and international powers intervening on opposing sides. The Assad regime, backed by Russia and Iran, unleashed a brutal crackdown on its own people. Opposition groups, fragmented and often at odds with each other, receive support from various external actors. The Syrian civil war has resulted in a catastrophic humanitarian crisis, with hundreds of thousands killed and millions displaced. The conflict has also had a profound impact on the region, fueling the rise of extremist groups and exacerbating sectarian tensions. Section 5. Yemen, a complex conflict fueled by regional powers. The Arab Spring also engulfed Yemen, the Arab world's poorest country. The wave of protests and uprisings that swept across the Middle East and North Africa in 2011 did not spare Yemen. The country, already struggling with poverty and underdevelopment, found itself at the heart of a significant political upheaval. Protests against the rule of President Ali Abdullah Saleh erupted in early 2011, demanding political and economic reforms. The streets of Yemen's cities were filled with demonstrators calling for an end to corruption and greater freedoms. The movement quickly gained momentum, reflecting the widespread discontent among the Yemeni population. While Saleh initially clung to power, he eventually agreed to step down in November 2011. His resignation marked the end of his 33-year rule, but it was not the end of Yemen's troubles. The transition was supposed to bring stability, but it instead opened a new chapter of uncertainty and conflict. However, Saleh's departure did not bring an end to Yemen's turmoil. The power vacuum left behind led to increased instability. Various factions, including tribal groups, political parties, and militant organizations, began to vie for control, each with its own agenda and vision for Yemen's future. The country remained deeply divided, with various factions vying for power. The political landscape became increasingly fragmented, making it difficult to establish a unified government. This division set the stage for further conflict and violence. In 2014, Houthi rebels, a Shia Muslim group with ties to Iran, seized control of the capital, Sana'a, forcing the internationally recognized government to flee. The Houthis, who had long felt marginalized, saw an opportunity to assert their influence. Their takeover of Sana'a was a significant turning point in the conflict. The conflict escalated into a full-blown civil war in 2015, when Saudi Arabia intervened militarily on the side of the government. The Saudi-led coalition, fearing the rise of an Iranian-backed group on its southern border, launched a campaign of airstrikes and ground operations. This intervention added a new layer of complexity to the conflict. The Saudi intervention, backed by the United States, has led to a devastating humanitarian crisis in Yemen, with millions facing famine and disease. The war has destroyed infrastructure, disrupted food supplies, and caused widespread suffering. Humanitarian organizations have struggled to provide aid amid the ongoing violence. The Yemeni conflict highlights the complexities of regional power struggles and the devastating consequences of proxy wars. It serves as a stark reminder of how local conflicts can be exacerbated by the involvement of external powers, leading to prolonged suffering for the civilian population. The situation in Yemen remains one of the world's most pressing humanitarian crises. Section 6. Tunisia's fragile democracy, a beacon of hope amidst turmoil. While the Arab Spring has led to violence and instability in many parts of the region, Tunisia stands out as a rare success story. Despite facing numerous challenges, including economic difficulties, political polarization, and security threats, Tunisia has managed to maintain a fragile democracy. Following the overthrow of Ben Ali in 2011, Tunisians embarked on a remarkable process of democratic transition. They drafted a new constitution, held free and fair elections, and established independent institutions. While the path has not been easy, Tunisia's democratic experiment offers a glimmer of hope for the region. Tunisia's success is due in part to its relatively homogeneous society, its strong civil society, and its pragmatic political leadership. However, the country's democratic gains remain fragile, and much work remains to be done to consolidate its transition. Section 7. The legacy of the Arab Spring, unfinished revolutions and the quest for dignity. The Arab Spring was a transformative moment in the history of the Middle East. It began in late 2010 and quickly spread across the region, igniting a series of protests and uprisings that sought to challenge decades of authoritarian rule. It shattered the myth of authoritarian stability, empowered ordinary citizens, and unleashed a wave of demands for freedom, dignity, and social justice. People from all walks of life took to the streets, united by a common desire for change and a better future. However, the uprisings also exposed the region's deep-seated problems, including economic inequality, political repression, and sectarian divisions. These issues, long simmering beneath the surface, erupted with a force that caught many by surprise. A decade after the Arab Spring, the region remains in a state of flux. The initial euphoria has given way to a more complex reality, where the hopes of the revolution are tempered by the challenges of rebuilding and reform. While some countries, like Tunisia, have made progress toward democracy, others have descended into chaos and civil war. The contrasting outcomes highlight the varied paths that different nations have taken in the wake of the uprisings. The legacy of the Arab Spring is complex and contested, a mix of hope and disappointment. For many, the dream of a more just and equitable society remains unfulfilled, yet the spirit of resistance and the quest for dignity endure. The Arab Spring was not a single event, but a process, a long and winding road toward a more just and equitable future. It was a moment of awakening, a collective realization that change was possible, even if the path forward was fraught with obstacles. The revolutions may be over, but the quest for freedom and dignity continues. Across the Middle East, new generations of activists and citizens are carrying forward the legacy of the Arab Spring, determined to build a better future for themselves and their communities.